Pensacola, not at all what I expected. I've had a wonderful couple of days, and I thank you so much for the opportunity and come and share some of my life with you and some of the village of Montalcino. You tonight are going to discover my passion for Italy. I'm going to give you a fascinating glimpse into what it's like to live in a medieval village. I'm going to talk to you about the social structure of that village, and I'm going to talk to you about the changes that come to a village like Montalcino from the outside walls when we are in the modern world. You see, my purpose for being in America is we desperately need to preserve the past in our village. At the same time, we must accept what's happening to Montalcino in the present, so that we can forge a future for our families. But you know, before I get to that little story, perhaps I have to let you into the road, the tangled road that led me to Montalcino. Because once you've heard that story, you will understand why I'm so passionate about it and why I'm here to share it with you. Ken has mentioned just a few of the scrapes that I managed to get into in Europe in a period of 3 years. Sounds like fun now. At the time, I didn't even know it was dangerous. And I'm going to share tonight what happened after that. We could spend a whole evening talking about those 3 years, but I don't have time to share that whole story with you. I want to share with you what happened to me after that period. At 19, I left Australia. I was born in Scotland, the daughter of a Baptist minister, migrant family to Australia. So born in Scotland, raised in Australia, and the next part of the story you'll hear soon. So with my childhood sweetheart, at 19, newly married, off we go to discover the world, which we did, and all those adventures that Ken talked about definitely occurred. But after a 3-year period or so living in London and working for royalty, I was secretary for Prince Rainier of Monaco, working at Columbia Pictures when Christopher Plummer and Julie Andrews were in my office every day. But I was an Australian, I didn't know who they were. Didn't mean anything. You know, Australians really do not have a conception of movie people or royalty. You know, we're way down there, the antipodes. Self-sufficient people who know no danger. Well, the time came for my young husband and myself to return to Australia. Well now, why aren't our friends impressed with our heroic travel tales? Enjoy this ride with me, folk, because it's funny, it's dramatic, and I want you to get a feeling for the kind of person I was. Why are they so unimpressed? Gosh, they've got the same lives, the same jobs. They're living in the same houses. Oh, just a minute. They've got babies? Oh, we better do that. Then we'll fit back in again. Well, you know, pregnancy was not a happy time for me. In fact, pregnancy was probably the loneliest time of my life. You see, my Scottish mother had an ability, as many dour Scottish women can have, to withhold everything inside, to not be expressive. I don't recall having kisses or cuddles from my mother. We were Scottish and we were Baptist, and we were very upright. So having a daughter was something of a trial. There were very few visitors when I was in hospital, even less afterwards. There were no baby gifts to speak of. It was a really lonely time. But I didn't know it was going to get a whole lot worse. So, squeezing baby Rebecca behind the two front seats of a MGB sports car, well, she just fitted, off we went to settle back into life in Australia, except that within a few months my husband was dead. My baby was fatherless. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up on impact. I listened to the police and then the ambulance go by because it was 500 metres from my home. I got dressed. I grabbed that little baby who's 6 months old, wrapped her in a blanket and waited for the knock at the door. Many people here will relate to what I'm telling you. And you know, I was angry. For years, for months, I was so angry that that could happen to me. Family are trying to get close, closing in on me. So I sold the house, grabbed the baby and moved to another state. Oh, no. Don't try and invade my feelings. I'll raise my daughter on my own. But I had to have an income that was going to bring me more money than being a secretary. So I reinvented myself as an interior designer. And in those days, there was not a lot of formal schooling for interior design. And so you learnt as you went along. But I was pretty good at pretending. I got some fabulous contracts by banging desks, slamming down phones, becoming a very hard woman. Not one to be tangled with. Do you know, I don't recall much about my baby Rebecca from the age of 6 months until she reached 10. There's kind of just a whole passage in there which is just gone. Somewhere, perhaps someday, that'll come back. But I don't know. I can't remember first days at school or baby teeth or any of her friends. It's just not there. Well then, here I am, an interior designer. Come with me very briefly through a second marriage. We'll just pass through that one lightly, will we? And now I'm a super career woman. I'm a super mum to 2 live-in stepchildren, as well as my daughter Rebecca. And I'm a super homemaker because husband number 2 was a naval commander. You got it. He's at sea all the time. There's just me. Well, I walked out on that relationship. And you have probably become familiar with the girl in every port story. Enough said. And now I find myself with a 10-year-old girl, a thriving business, but no home and no husband. I could see the loneliness ahead again. And more than ever, I was sure I was not cut out to be a mother. What did I do? Now brace yourself for this because you are not going to like it. Not one little bit. I gave my daughter away. You didn't like it, did you? I knew you wouldn't. I gave my daughter away. My sister could have no children, and she jumped at the chance to raise Rebecca. But if I do, she said, don't you come running back in a few months or a couple of years and ask for Rebecca back again. That's not on. This will be permanent. She'll have a mother and a father, and we will bring her up in a stable home. Oh, that sounds good. I'll get back and run my business. I enrolled Rebecca into a private ladies' school and then left the raising of Rebecca to my sister whilst I worked hard to pay for the school fees. Well, you know, by the time Rebecca was finishing high school, I had met Luigi. Now, Luigi was from an Italian-Australian family. And I liked Luigi because he let me be the boss. He let me dominate. I made all the decisions. Our relationship was kind of going along okay. Rebecca gained entry to university. Wow, all that work. It's finally paid off. I've got there. Not so fast. She's met a young man. Not my choice, and certainly not my sister's choice, of a boyfriend for Rebecca. I had struggled to pay school fees, music lessons, excursions, holidays with socially upmarket friends, and all the things that go along with it. My sister was beside herself with anguish. "He sleeps in his car," she wailed. "He's dropped out of school. He's in trouble with the police. Do something." "Me? Do something?" Well, my sister was probably racked with guilt because I had handed Rebecca over to her. Rebecca had become involved with an undesirable element. My sister fell victim to depression and began resorting to prescription drugs and began a downhill spiral. I know how I'll break this relationship. I'll take Rebecca to Italy. Luigi, you can come too. Leading them down a goat track just outside the walls of the village of Montalcino, I stopped in front of a sublimely simple Madonna, staring off into eternal silence. I had been there 18 years before with Rebecca's father, but I didn't tell her. I kept it inside, just blinked away the tears. Well, the holiday is over and we're back in Australia, and you are right, the boyfriend is waiting, isn't he? He wasn't going anywhere. Rebecca moves out of my sister's house, my sister's beautiful house. You bet, in with the boyfriend, in some rat hole in a suburb that you don't want to be in. "Are you crazy?" I said to her. "You'll have 3 or 4 relationships before you know what you're doing. Goodness me, don't you know men let you down? Men are not stable." Wise words from a mother. My sister was humiliated that Rebecca would move out of her upmarket home, and we began to fight. "Mum," it's Rebecca on the phone. Mum, hi Mum, I'm moving to Mount Newman." Yeah, it's a mining town, West Australia." I bet you've never been there. "It is the end of the world. Wild camels attack when you're hanging up the washing. Believe me. Your skin, your fingernails, your hair, your bed sheets, your towels, everything takes on that red outback Australian hue. Ghastly. Goannas and dingoes roam around. You're moving to Mount Newman. Okay. What about university, Rebecca? You qualified for university. What about all the fees I paid?" Just what a child wants to hear from a mother, especially one like me. You can relate, can't you? "Oh, but just a minute. Oh, now my business is in turmoil. We had a pilot strike. We had a credit squeeze, followed by a property crash. Nearly 2 decades of work. Carving out yet another new life. Standing determinedly alone, this super iron lady went bankrupt. Completely bankrupt. Well, I had stood alone, bluffing, pretending, working and gathering. No use blaming the pilots, or the property crash, or the credit squeeze. My fault. Should have seen the signs. One more big project. One more, that'll buy me out. Doesn't work. So now I'm bankrupt. I have a well-educated runaway daughter living in a mining town. I have a drug-dependent sister. And there's this guy, Luigi, that wants to marry me. Are you kidding? Oh, an iron bolt snapped shut. Get the battle dress on. Insulate yourself. Don't show anything to do with pain about losing 20 years' worth of work. No. I often thought, why couldn't I just have had a normal life? A loyal husband, nice home, a family, a good mother. In 20 years, I had never had a home of my own. I was busy creating wonderful interior design projects for other people, but I had never set down roots, and I had never had my own home. Hi, Mum, it's Rebecca. Oh, hi, Rebecca. Hi, Becca. Mum, I'm at Capricorn Roadhouse. Yeah, that's 1,000 miles north of Perth. Yeah, 3,000 miles from Sydney. Yeah, in the desert. Yeah, Mum, I'm having a baby. Well, that was really exciting news, wasn't it? And as this drama unfolds, Luigi in the background wants to rekindle the Italian way of life that he glimpsed when we were on holidays. Oh, he says, would you like to come with me and live in Italy? Would I? Rebecca, it's Mum. Hi, Beck. Yeah, Becca, I'm moving to Italy with Luigi. What? She's indignant. Mum, the baby will be born and you'll be so far away. Could be good. Well, I sold everything that I possessed, which was not much, like clothing and books and pictures off the walls, scraped together enough money for the airfare and landed in Italy with 2 suitcases and a little bag of cash. Luigi and I thought that we might try and get into tourism, something which we knew absolutely nothing about, but we thought we'd learn as we went along. But the bag of cash ran out. Oh, I nearly said a naughty word. The bag of cash runs out. Luigi rings his mother. Mum, can you send me some money? We've got to get back to Australia. Oh, gosh, we nearly did it. Okay, we're back in Australia. We've still got no money. But we took a 6-month live-in job with a wealthy family in a Sydney suburb. We were the servants. 8 toilets in that waterside mansion. I scrubbed every one of them. I cooked, washed, ironed, cleaned, ran after 2 children at private school. But I was determined. I refused to be beaten until I had found one Australian travel agent to take an interest in our tour products in Italy. And I did it. That was a hard 6 months. Not many people knew we were back in Australia. Rebecca knew, and my sister knew, but her spirit was broken. After yet another wicked fight, she threw me out of her house, and I was never to speak with or see her again. So Luigi and I are back in Italy, and we gravitated to Montalcino again. Well, for the first 2 years, speaking no Italian whatsoever, but of course understanding what cappuccino and buongiorno meant, I lived in a silent world. Luigi spoke Italian in Australia in his Italo-Australian home, so he had to take the lead. Well, that was new. I'd been the boss of everything. Now I had to smile sweetly while Luigi spoke for both of us. In silence, I observed a world so different to the world that I had left. I had to learn a cultured and courteous way of being, requiring manners and self-dignity. I became the Signora Bionda, the blonde lady, and I learned to keep my mouth shut. I never imagined myself living in this world. I was able to let go of the hard, dominating woman. I was able to let go of the hurt bottled up for years. And finally, I was able to let go of the anger at the whole world. Now picture in your mind a huddle of stone houses, church towers and bell towers, straddling down the side of a hill, and of course surrounded by the green hills of Tuscany. Stone farmhouses and vineyards. It's not hard. Even the word Tuscany conjures up that image. All over the world. If you travel to Italy, you might find yourself moving from village to village, and sometimes it's hard to work out exactly what goes on in those small villages. Especially when you come from a country like America. How do they live? What do they do? If we walk to one of the neighbourhoods of Montalcino, We can look up at the stone houses straddling the hill, and there are people living in those houses, now approaching 100 years of age, who have never left the hill. They see no reason to go anywhere else. And if we follow the genealogy of many of those people, we come back to many hundreds of years ago when Montalcino was owned by 24 families, all of it. Those families now have very long roots and very long branches. These are the ancestors who spilled their blood, fighting alongside Siena for freedom and liberty against the despotic rulers of Florence. Even today, hundreds of years later, there is little love in Montalcino for anything to do with Florence. We align ourselves to Siena, visiting Florence if we have to, but Siena because we want to. You have probably heard of the Palio horse race in Siena. The first flag around the Campo every time the Palio is run is the flag of Montalcino. Because Siena has never forgotten that when that great city fell to Florence, it was Montalcino that protected their aristocrats inside our fortress for 4 years, proclaiming the Republic of Siena at Montalcino. But in 1559, it all came to an end, and the last flag of freedom was lowered from our fortress. But the people of Montalcino did not consider themselves defeated. They declared, smouldering, to the Florentines, having lost everything that we could lose, at least we do not lose our honour. You Florentines have been on our territory but a few days, with never a battle to claim victory over us. Montalcino is divided into 4 quarters, called quartieri. Your quartiere is an extension of your family and your home, and each quartiere accepts responsibility to preserve the traditions and culture of the village. Chronicles tell us that these quartieres existed in the 1400s, but in the modern era, post-World War II, when Montalcino was one of the poorest and most neglected villages in the whole of Tuscany, with no running water, no electricity, no made roads, no kitchens or bathrooms in the homes until the early 70s, and Montalcino had a political stance that was not in favour in Rome. So the misery of the town was simply ignored by central power. So post-war, the 4 quartieri, became very important in creating a life for the people in the village. I come to you tonight as an ambassador from Quartiere Pianello. Oh, our colours. Here's our colours. Let me show you our colours. Because each quarter has a banner and an emblem and colours. And this is Quartiere Pianello. It's very important in Montalcino to be identified by your colours at certain times of the year. But you don't wear it except on special occasions. And you never wear it into another quartiere, because that would be disrespectful. Under this banner that you've just seen on my scarf, we continue in our quartiere to fight for honour. But being a member of Pianello is about responsibility. By the time you are 8, you have the responsibility to put on the carnival party for the 5-year-olds. When you are 10 and 12, you are organising a games night for the 8 and 10-year-olds. When you are 15 and 16, you are putting on the disco for the 12-year-olds. Do you get it? A continuing growth into responsibility. By the time you are 20, you're siphoning wine, you're building the fire, chopping the wood, and you're doing it with the people you have grown up with in your own quartiere. your neighbourhood. Yes, our young people do have to go to Siena or even Florence or Rome to university. But they don't like it there. They can't wait for Friday night to get back to their quartiere, their village, their friends. In Brunello we have a president and office bearers, and we have a headquarters or a sede, meeting rooms, dining rooms, kitchens and a bar. And all of this is attached to our church, which is the Church of San Pietro, which is the church we are endeavouring to restore together with its contents. We preserve the culture and traditions of our village at social events, entertaining each other, cultivating arts, training our junior and senior archery squads, because we fight for the honour of our quartiere twice a year in an emotional and passionate archery tournament. Don't think it's like belonging to a club. It's way, way deeper, far richer and far more important to the life of this village than belonging to a club. The very roots of Brunello citizens are embedded in the honour of their neighbourhood. And throughout the year we express this at functions in our sede, culminating in an outpouring of emotion and passion when our blue and white clad archers move onto the firing range, firing those arrows on behalf of every single one of them. It's a collective battle. We are involved with their preparation and their practice, with the flight of every arrow, as well as the prayed for victory and the joy of winning. But there's no prize. There is no prize. There is no trophy, no bag of money. There is only the honour for your quartiere. As a result of this kind of neighbourhood, we have some great advantages in Montalcino, and these are going to surprise you. First of all, we have no alcohol problems in our village. We have no drugs in our village, and we have no crime rate, because we don't have enough crime to rate. No, it's not utopia. In many places in Italy, there are just as many problems as you will find in a society anywhere in the world. But in villages like Montalcino, largely because of our quartiere neighbourhood system, our young people grow with confidence and with a strong sense of belonging, with their roots deeply embedded in the territory of their ancestors. They made the decision not to confuse having alcohol with having fun. Concept to be thought about, isn't it? They made it plain that there will be no drugs in Montalcino. If you want drugs, you go to Montepulciano. They're the enemy and they are Florentines. Or down the valley to Bonconvento. Now, I've spoken to our young people about this because it just seems an astonishing thing, and this is the answer that they gave me. Not in our village, because it will ruin our lives and then we would lose our honour. In our Brunello sede, our headquarters, we have a bar, stocked with wines and spirits, and it's run on an honour system. Youngsters of all ages and children and adults come to our quartiere, maybe to watch a soccer game if Italy's playing someone or other, or make pizza before a movie. They invite friends from other quartieri. If it's your birthday, you have your birthday party in our headquarters because our homes are small. We can't entertain at home. You decorate the sede, the headquarters, and bring in the music. And if you want drink, well, there's the bar. You help yourself. And you put your money in the box that sits at the front of the bar. Now, I've shown a lot of visitors this money box sitting open on the bar. And they will say to me, well, I wouldn't be asking where the money is. I'd be asking where the box has gone. And isn't it so? But you see, it would be like stealing from yourself. The quartiere is their home. And they simply don't do that. You would already know that it's generally beneath the dignity of an Italian to lose self-control through alcohol. And in Montalcino, it's virtually non-existent, even among our young people. So you might wonder, as I did, well, what do the young people get out of this? They take responsibility for our headquarters, the traditions and culture of our village. What's in it for them? Wouldn't they rather be out in the modern world, which we see around us every day? Our young people are similar to yours. They wear the latest clothes. They sit around the bars with their feet up. Music reverberates between the walls of our stone houses, etc., etc. They disco in Pianello till midnight. What do they get in return? I'll tell you what they get, because it took me a while to work it out. They get tolerance. Tolerance. We don't complain. They are all our kids. They all are here in our village, and the most significant thing of all is that they don't leave our village to have fun. The culture we want to preserve is a family neighbourhood sanctuary so that our young will stay in the village of their ancestors. And it's working. We have around 2,000 people living inside our walls and another 2,000 living outside. But there are social differences that have come down through the centuries. Not as pronounced now, but still there. For instance, for example, the lowest social class we call the contadini. The peasants who worked the land for rich landowners through many hundreds of years, in fact generation after generation, who could never get out of debt because they were always indebted to the landowner under a system of farming similar to sharecropping, but in Italy called the mezzadria. A contadino, when he came to Montalcino, was not allowed to be seen on the main roads or in the piazza. He had to use the back roads. He wasn't worthy to be in the piazza. He was not permitted to be in the village after sundown or before sunup. He lived a pretty miserable existence. He had food to eat because he grew it himself, but his house was primitive and he shared it with the animals. This was the state of the contadini up until just after the Second World War. And there is a saying in Montalcino that exists today: once a contadino, always a contadino. Even today, they cannot shake off the yoke of the past. If you live within the walls, you are a cittadino. A cittadino is a village dweller. And there are many layers of village dwellers. Obviously, top of the hierarchy would be the engineers and the lawyers and the doctors, and then after that, perhaps the school teachers and the merchants, and then the shoemakers and the iron makers, and finally the people that run the errands and work the bellows at the forge and so on. But top of the social class then were the aristocrats, the noble families, who owned the large tracts of land. They often had titles bestowed on them from the Pope or the Doge of Venice, rewarding them for alliance in some war. At the end of World War II, these vast tracts of land that were owned by the aristocrats were barren, unproductive, because the contadini, the peasant farmers, had been conscripted into the Italian army. So no longer able to gather an income from the land, these aristocrats turned to building steel factories or cement works for an Italy that was industrialising post-war. Village people suffered. There was now no work in Montalcino, and they sent their sons to Switzerland to become bricklayers and send money back to hungry families within the walls. The contadini, at the end of the war, were landless and homeless, drifting in their thousands to the towns to find work in post-war factories now owned by the landowners, their old enemy. And they were still in debt to their landowners. The government of the day was anxious to rekindle agriculture in Italy, and they offered small parcels of land to the contadini. Most of them had no money, but some managed to gather enough money so that they could get hold of 1 or 2 acres. And of course, they did not know that that land was going to be destined to be land on which they could grow the great wine, Brunello di Montalcino. But the aristocrats who had kept some of their land, were not happy. Off they went to Rome, to the government. You've got to stop those contadini planting Brunello. They're just contadini. Let them plant potatoes and beans. We're the aristocrats. We'll grow the wine. That took some years. It wasn't until 1967 that the contadini won their case, and it was decided that they too could plant Brunello. The once socially upmarket middle class who lived inside the walls, unemployed, hungry people post-war, were humiliated. They had no work and no money. They had to go out to the land, try and get hold of a little parcel of land. They had to dig stones, cut wood in order to survive. And they too managed to get a little bit of land out in the countryside, just 3 or 4 or 5 hectares. But they didn't live out in the countryside. Even today, a cittadini Brunello grower will not live permanently on his vineyard. It's beneath his social status. He still lives in the village, which is his main address, even though it might be one of those gorgeous Tuscan farmhouses. He's a village dweller, not a contadino. The aristocratic class, well, their land was either confiscated or they sold off and kept larger parcels, 30 or 40 acres, and they too grow Brunello di Montalcino. And so in a matter of 30 years, the social class was turned upside down, completely upside down. Those contadini who lived with their animals are now amongst the richest growers of Brunello di Montalcino. This is the village in which I have reinvented my life. In Quartiere Pianello, we are working to restore a 1,000-year-old church. The story of how we came to be the owner of this church is written up in my books. Okay, 2 books. Some of you have already read my books. These are the story of Montalcino. There are 3 major works of art in the church. Can we turn that round now? Thank you. All by an artist called Ventura Salimbeni. He was Sienese, born in 1568, and his works are internationally recognised. This particular work, which we're turning to face you as best we can, he painted in the year 1600. Salimbeni had no conception that this work was going to bring astrologists, ufologists, and the odd scientist to Montalcino 400 years later to argue about his depiction. The painting is called The Glorification of the Eucharist. We're in the period of the Counter-Reformation. The church, we just say church because we're not Catholic or anything, we're just church, is thrashing about trying to get itself out of a sticky situation. The schism, the great schism. The Greek church has already rejected transubstantiation. The Protestants are getting a bit noisy over there in Germany under Martin Luther. And the church is beginning to lose control of theology concerning transubstantiation. And so these artworks became very important. In the bottom half of this piece, you can see 4 theological doctors of the church. Oh, they're waiting for divine inspiration, they're writing, they're thinking, they're praying. And in the middle of the picture is the fulcrum of the work, in this box with the above the chalice and a beautiful veil across it, meant to represent the bread and the wine, the holy sacraments. But what is this at the top? Well, you say that's obviously God. Yes, you're right, and this is Jesus Christ. But what is this sphere between them? Is that 2 antennas coming out the top? Is this, well, certainly something shining there, but what about here? Is that a protrusion, telescope, camera? And no, it is not just a ball of paint. In fact, this is sections that seems to be steel pieces welded together. Now I know what you're thinking, it meant to represent the earth. It's the sun and the moon, isn't it? But the church is still teaching that the earth is flat. Why would the church commission a round earth when it's against doctrine of the time? To all intents and purposes, for those of you who will already be aware of this piece of art, this sphere with its antenna and its projection is almost the same image of the Russian Sputnik, the Vanguard, that went into space in 1956. So you can see why astrologists and ufologists come to Montalcino. And this is one of the paintings in our little church. So we were able to get permission from the superintendent of art in Florence and from the Archbishop of Siena, and that's not an easy thing to do, to reproduce 1,000 limited edition numbered copies, which are made available for corporate people, private people, anyone who wishes to donate to our cause $100 will be the owner of a limited edition Salimbini poster. Imagine if we had here's an interesting equation. If we had 100 posters sold in Pensacola, that make 10,000? We got it restored. Restored by the people of Pensacola. Don't you love that? We have 3 of them, and each of them will take about 10,000 to restore. Then we have to do the altars. Think about it, folks, because this is why I'm here. We need your help. We need your help. You may interpret Salimbini's work differently, but keep in mind what the chroniclers tell us. Salimbini did not hold dearly to the teachings of the church. Many believe it was Salimbini's way of inserting a message about extraterrestrial visitors into a Holy Commission. Well, folks, I'm going to close very shortly. But first I want to tell you about why this painting, this church, this way of life is so precious. Because today we are under threat. We are under threat from an outside world in Montalcino. Our young people are university educated, and now, whether they're contadino, cittadino, or aristocrats, and now their work, because they love to work in Montalcino, they don't want to work anywhere else, takes them to Japan or Russia, America, China. The word Montalcino or Brunello has now become an international symbol for excellence. When I arrived in Montalcino, there was nobody who spoke English. Now our school teaches 5 languages. In a handful of years, our young have come into contact with a world they never knew they would ever experience. But they come back happily from abroad when the wine tastings are over, when the export drive is over. They're safe and secure within our walls. They like to be within the heritage of their ancestors, and they desire a tranquil life. But the international fame of Brunello has brought many changes to our village. One of them is tourism. Only a handful of years ago, citizens could not understand why people were even coming. What are they doing here, they would ask. What have they come here for, as a bus would drive up to the gates? Now we have traffic wardens, parking tickets. Our bars are generally crowded with cappuccino drinking visitors. The mayor had to send a message around to every household. Would you please not leave your house keys in your doors anymore? And lock your cars. Don't leave the keys in your cars. That's the way it had been in Montalcino. But now we are, to a degree, on the map. With fame comes encroachment. It does not always bring benefits. We don't reject visitors. We like them. The tourist dollar is welcome, but we're not dependent on it. We have an economy based on agriculture, and we can survive very well, thank you very much. But if you do come, don't expect to get hot fries and mayonnaise. No way. You take us as we are in Montalcino. We have a restricted number of beds available for overnight stays. And Montalcino, still with a political stance decidedly to the left, will not allow industrialisation, more hotels, or to spoil the countryside. Some people feel Montalcino is changing too quickly. Families who were poor contadini or modest cittadini are now running million-dollar businesses through their children. People are worried that we're going to lose this precious way of life that we have. We know we must keep our quartiere going. We must make sure that our children want to stay in our village. At the moment, we are winning the battle. We have a population explosion. Our birth rate has just gone through the roof. And very soon we're going to have to apply to the government for a whole new classroom because we have 25 babies this year. And in 5 years, they're all going to be at school. And that is wonderful for a small village in Tuscany. We have a good chance of winning this battle, thanks to our quartiere. So the quartiere take responsibility for the young and the preservation of a way of life. And we are striving to preserve our past, a sense of belonging and honour. But at the same time, we have to accept what's happening now in our village, which has become an international phenomenon. Montalcino is at the apex of an international pyramid of Italian products. It deserves the accolades that are heaped upon it, definitely, but it may be hard in the future to maintain that image. We have to provide for our young in a fast-changing world. A world where Montalcino's wine conjures up an excellence which circles the globe. This is what we are facing now, and it will be measured by our success in preserving the way of life in our quartiere. Now, I've given you insight into the way of life, an understanding of the values and traditions of our quartiere and our way of life. There were times when I wished I'd had an ordinary life, but now I see I've had an extraordinary life. I've been writing books, speaking a foreign language. Here I'm an ambassador to you for Quartiere Pianello. What an honour is that? But before I close, I want to tell you the end of my personal story, because otherwise you'll worry what happened to my sister and my daughter, right? You were hoping I'd tell, yes. Well, I never did see or speak with my sister again. At the age of 54, she died of an attack of asthma, brought on and exacerbated by prescribed drugs. She was so depressed, thinking her life had been wasted because she let me down and Rebecca. So I did never see her. Rebecca, on the other hand, with 2 children under the age of 5. No, I was not there for the wedding. No, I was not there either for the birth of the first child, nor the second child. Gained her degree at Perth University. Rebecca works with young people from broken homes. Kids in trouble with the police, school dropouts. Do you get it? Like, it took me a long time to get it, didn't it? That's why she gravitated to the man she did. She's a carer. The undesirable element came from a broken home. He wanted a home and a family of his own, and that is what Rebecca wanted, the things that I could not give her. Yes, they are still together, and yes, they are happy. We now have a relationship built on acceptance, forgiveness, and understanding, and I had the most to learn. The bridges have been built, and the tears have fallen, and the sun shines again. I hope, friends, as you think about our time together, and you think also about your own neighbourhood, your own young people and way of life in this country, remember that we on the other side of the world are striving to preserve a precious way of life. 400 people in a little community. I hope that next time you sip a glass of that wonderful Brunello di Montalcino, and I hope it's not too long away. Remember that it is a wine born of struggle and hardship, contadini, cittadini, and aristocrats. A wine which has brought social evolution to our village, along with its success. I hope you will help us to save our way of life. And I hope to see you real soon in Montalcino. Thank you, folks. Well, we might have some questions. Please feel free. Oh, yes, please.
Being a foreigner in a medieval community, how could you feel that you were accepted as you have been accepted?
That's always one of the very first questions. And I'm happy to answer it. The first answer is, I'm here on behalf of Quartiere Pianello, so something worked. But it was not easy. I have been living in Montalcino for 15 years. The first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you have the feeling that you're being accepted, but there's still a barrier that you cannot get over. Do you know when I got over the barrier? I started to give to my community. There are many people that go and live in Greece or France or Italy, and they have wonderful lifestyles. They renovate a lovely house or apartment, and they have a great time, and they invite their friends from back home. Generally, those people are taking from the country they have adopted as their own, instead of giving back to the community. I honestly have to tell you that once I began to understand that I needed to give to Montalcino, the doors began to open. And after a period of about 3 years, where they still, let's wait and see how this works out, by about the 11th year, we felt that we were gaining their trust and their acceptance. I have a letter from the president of Quartiere Pianello with me, and he sends his greetings to all of the people that I speak to in America. And one of his sentences is, Luigi and Isabella came among us, and we were very suspicious of this strange Italian with an English accent. Because in Montalcino, we're very jealous. We're very possessive of our history and our village. And it is not until they have been looked up and down by the locals, talked about in the bars for a long time, before we will acknowledge that they are part of our clan. Isabella and Luigi are part of our clan. What an honour is that. Next question. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll get back to that in a minute. Oh yeah, Luigi's still there. Yes?
I was just curious, in the same vein of giving, how foreign investors and I'm thinking particularly of the American-owned Castello Banfi,
yes.
How instrumental they've been in restoring this church or restoring the community, and how that's seen by, I guess,
yes.
citizens, the cittadini.
Since they came to Montalcino, Castello Banfi have been very active in the village. First of all, they had to spend a heap of money to restore the castle, which they did, and set about bringing in what you would state-of-the-art winemaking equipment that did not exist in Montalcino in 1984 when they came. And they support the town in various measures, the football club, an evening of music in the theatre, etc., etc. At the moment, you might have heard that several of our growers have big problems internationally with their wine, and Banfi is one of those companies. No charges have been laid, no formal finding has authenticated any misdoing whatsoever. So as far as our church is concerned, at the moment, Banfi is a bit in limbo. Okay? We hope that before too long, they will come to our aid. But at the moment, they have not. The Bank of Monte Paschi di Siena has come to our aid so that we could renew the roof and the vault of the church. And that's a huge amount of money. But now, it's the art and the organ and the altars, the electrical works that we have to restore ourselves. Banfi are considered to be good people for Montalcino. They have not done anything that you would ever think. They have not come into Montalcino with flags flying, or here are the Americans, we'll show you how to do it. No, they didn't do that. They were too clever for that. And they were aware that if they were there for the long term, they had to be very careful what the locals thought of them. So they have succeeded in that. Next question. Yes, madam. I'll wait for the microphone. Here we are.
Is the church presently being used as a church now? Or
Yes.
is it going to be a museum type thing?
Oh, no. We bought this church from the Vatican. Now, you might say, well, how can you buy a church from the Vatican? The priest died after 45 years, and the Vatican offered us the church as its custodians. So we have the titles, but we cannot sell it. The condition is that the church must remain a consecrated Christian church. Yes, we have Mass. The last service was about 5 weeks ago when one of our babies was baptized, and it will continue to be a functioning Christian church. It may not be used every week, because in Montalcino we have 2 priests who rotate between our different quartierian churches.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions before the auction.
What is Luigi doing while you're out of town?
Being the boss.
Being the boss? Because now you're the boss.
Oh, Luigi's fine. Luigi's one of those very easily pacifist kind of Italians. You know, they make love, not war.
Yeah.
And it works very well for both of us. He enjoys his time alone. I can be pretty full on. I don't know if you got that impression. You know, I don't stop for breath now and again. I think he probably quite enjoys it when I'm away, and he can kind of sleep in and answer his emails and not be perturbed by Isabella's next great venture. Do we have the last one?
2 questions, if I could. One is easy. Has Pianello yet won the Sagra?
Oh, yes! Absolutely. We go mad.
What is the significance of vanilla beans?
Okay. Have you read my book? Well, you know that one of the chapters in the book is called Vanilla Beans and Brodo, where on one occasion I go to the pharmacy and am astonished to find that you buy vanilla beans and soup cubes at the pharmacy. When my publishers were thrashing around trying to find a title for the books, they did not want to have a typical Tuscany title, because the book is not about someone who goes to live in Tuscany. The book is about the village of Montalcino. And in the end, it is your publishers who decide, who have the final say on what your title will be. And they went that way to keep my books separate from the typical restoring a house, a farm, a vineyard in Tuscany. That's really all.
Let's thank our speaker.